Let the world underestimate you. Let them assume you're average. While they sleep on you, you sharpen your edge, read the books, train the body, study the art, write the vision. Restraint is one of the most misunderstood forms of power. In a world addicted to noise, we're conditioned to believe that if we're not speaking, we're not relevant. If we're not posting, we're not progressing. If we're not responding, we're being disrespected. But real power doesn't beg to be seen. It doesn't announce itself in every room. It doesn't respond to every challenge. Real power is quiet, composed, and deliberate. It's the ability to know exactly what you're capable of and still choose not to show it. Restraint is not weakness. It is control. It's knowing you could speak but choosing silence. It's knowing you could fight but choosing peace. It's knowing you could expose someone but choosing integrity. The strongest people in the world are not the loudest. They are the ones who know when to engage and when to walk away. They are the ones who understand that every reaction costs energy, and not every battle is worth the price. When you learn restraint, you start living life on your terms. You stop being baited by other people's chaos. You no longer feel the need to defend yourself to those who have already made up their mind about you. You realize that trying to prove yourself to people who misunderstand you is a form of emotional poverty. So you stop explaining. You stop performing. You simply move. The loudest people are often the most insecure. They need to be seen. They need to be validated. They need to be praised to feel important. But those who are truly evolving know that growth doesn't need to be announced. You don't need to shout that you're healing. You don't need to post every step of your journey. Your life is not a stage for public consumption. It's a sacred space where transformation happens in silence. There's incredible freedom in choosing not to react. People will push your buttons to get a rise out of you. They will test your limits. They will try to provoke you into explaining, defending, justifying. But when you know who you are, you no longer need to argue for your value. You no longer need to prove your worth through words. You let your energy speak. You let your results speak. You let your silence become a mirror to their noise. Restraint teaches you emotional discipline. It trains you to pause, to observe, to listen. You don't just speak because you can. You speak when it adds value. You don't just react because you're triggered. You respond with purpose. And sometimes, the most powerful response is no response at all. In relationships, restraint creates respect. It sets the tone that your time, your energy, your peace are not up for grabs. You don't react to every comment. You don't involve yourself in petty arguments. You don't chase closure. You walk away from what doesn't serve your growth. You understand that you don't owe anyone access to your emotional world simply because they demand it. You become unbothered. And that is one of the most powerful states a person can reach. In business, restraint builds leverage. When you don't show all your cards, people can't play you. When you speak less, people listen more. When you hold back your moves, you control the narrative. You no longer move based on pressure or fear of missing out. You move when it's time. And because you haven't revealed your process to everyone, your impact hits harder. It's unexpected. It's undeniable. It's respected. Restraint also creates mystery. And mystery builds value. People can't manipulate what they don't understand. When you stop sharing every detail of your life, you become unpredictable. You create a boundary that says, you can't access me just because you're curious. Not everyone deserves to know what you're working on. Not everyone is qualified to speak into your vision. Silence is your filter. It keeps the noise out and your focus in. There will be moments when restraint feels like isolation. When you'll want to scream just to be heard. When you'll want to defend yourself just to feel understood. But in those moments, ask yourself, what do I gain by reacting? Does this move me forward? Does this align with who I'm becoming? Or is this just my ego trying to protect itself? The truth is, your ego will always want the last word. But your higher self knows that peace is better than being right. Growth is better than attention. Silence is better than drama. You don't need to clap back. You don't need to announce your comebacks. You don't need to correct every false narrative. Trust that what is real will reveal itself in time, and trust yourself enough to know that your energy is too sacred to waste on people who don't matter. When you stop reacting to everything, you start reclaiming your power. You start showing up from a place of confidence instead of insecurity. There's an art to knowing when to speak and when to stay silent, and the more you master this, the more powerful you become. Because now, you're not driven by emotion, you're guided by clarity. You've learned to sit with the discomfort of silence and use it as a tool for transformation. You've learned that growth doesn't need to be noisy to be real. So the next time you're tempted to respond, to defend, to explain, pause. Ask yourself, is this worth my peace? Is this worth my time? Is this moving me closer to the person I'm becoming? If the answer is no, choose silence, choose peace, choose restraint. You don't need to be louder, you need to be clearer. And clarity is born in silence. The more you practice restraint, the more you rise above the noise. And in a world that's constantly shouting, your silence will be the loudest thing they hear. Discipline is not something you shout about. It's something you do. It's the quiet repetition of actions that no one applauds, but that build everything worthwhile in your life. Discipline is not glamorous. It's not dramatic. It doesn't crave recognition. It just works consistently. When motivation fades and emotions shift, the people who evolve are the ones who don't wait to feel like it. They show up regardless. They understand that progress isn't about excitement, it's about consistency. Every single time you do what you said you were going to do, even when you don't feel like it, you build self-trust, and that self-trust becomes a weapon in a world full of people who constantly betray themselves for comfort. When you commit to discipline, you enter a private contract with your future self, and no one else is invited to that agreement. You don't need to make public declarations. You don't need to convince the world you're changing. You just do the work, quietly, ruthlessly, repeatedly, and the more you keep that contract, the more your future begins to respect you. Doors start opening, not because you forced them, but because you prepared for them. You became ready. You didn't chase opportunity. You became the kind of person opportunity wants to find. There's a misconception that discipline is rigid or joyless, but that's not true. Discipline is freedom. It liberates you from chaos. It gives your life structure. It allows you to create results on demand, not just when you're inspired. The people who only work when they feel good never go far, but those who develop the muscle of discipline, they build unshakable momentum. And that momentum makes them unstoppable. Even on their bad days, they're dangerous, because they don't fold, they don't pause, they adapt, they move. The truth is, most people don't lack goals, they lack discipline. Everyone wants change, but very few want the discomfort that comes with it. They want the result without the repetition. They want the confidence without the commitment. But discipline asks more of you. It asks you to make decisions that prioritize your future over your present feelings. It asks you to say no when it's easier to say yes. It asks you to sit with the boring, the difficult, the inconvenient. And when you do, it rewards you with something most people never get: control over yourself. There's a certain kind of power that comes when you start honoring your own standards. You stop negotiating with excuses. You stop delaying the hard stuff. You stop outsourcing your accountability. You take full ownership of your life. That's what discipline does. It removes the option to stay stuck. It doesn't wait for perfect conditions. It moves through resistance like a blade. It cuts through distraction, through procrastination, through fear. And every day you practice it, you become sharper. Think about it. How many times have you broken promises to yourself? How many times have you said, "I'll start tomorrow," and then repeated the same cycle for months? Every time you do that, you weaken your internal integrity. You send a message to your brain that your word doesn't matter. And when that happens, your confidence erodes. Because confidence isn't built by compliments. It's built by repetition. It's built by showing up, day after day, and doing what you said you would. Even when it's hard, even when it's thankless, even when no one claps. Discipline isn't sexy. It looks like setting your alarm when everyone else is still scrolling. It looks like choosing the gym when your body is tired. It looks like reading instead of binging another show. It looks like turning off your phone and focusing. It looks like sacrifice. But that sacrifice isn't punishment. It's alignment. It's you telling yourself, "I'm not here to coast. I'm here to grow." People will try to distract you from your discipline. They'll mock your routine. They'll say you're too intense. But let them. Their resistance has nothing to do with you. It's a reflection of their own lack of control. They don't understand what it means to live on purpose. But you do. Because you've felt what it's like to drift. You've felt what it's like to waste time. And now, you've made a decision to change that. So don't apologize for your discipline. Protect it. Guard it like your life depends on it. Because it does. Discipline doesn't just change your habits. It changes your identity. When you become the kind of person who follows through, everything shifts. Your standards rise. Your circle evolves. Your vision sharpens. You don't entertain distractions the way you used to. You don't tolerate low-effort energy. You attract different opportunities because you've become a different person. And that person wasn't built in a day. They were built in the quiet, in the daily grind, in the hours no one else sees. Sometimes, discipline looks like making the right decision 1,000 times with no reward in sight. You won't always see immediate results. But that doesn't mean it's not working. Seeds grow underground long before they break the surface. Trust the process. Trust the grind. Trust yourself. Every day you show up, you're laying the foundation for something greater. And one day, it will show, not because you told everyone, but because you became undeniable. Discipline is not about being perfect. You will fall. You will miss a day. You will slip. But discipline is also about resilience. It's the ability to get back on track without spiraling into shame. It's the commitment to the long game. You don't quit because it got hard. You adapt. You evolve. You continue. You get back up without making a scene and return to the work. That's what makes you strong. That's what separates you from the rest. You don't need a perfect plan. You need consistency. You need grit. You need a quiet internal fire that says, I will not stop. And that fire is lit by discipline. No applause. No spotlight. Just you and the work and the unwavering decision to keep going. Every single day. You want to change your life. Start by keeping one promise to yourself. Do it in silence. Let it build. Let it become who you are. Because once you master discipline, no one can take it from you. Not circumstances, not criticism, not failure. Discipline is your anchor. And when everything else gets loud, you'll still rise. Quietly, powerfully, relentlessly. Most people are terrified of being alone. Not physically necessarily, but emotionally and mentally. They surround themselves with constant stimulation, music, conversation, scrolling, endless distraction. Because they can't bear to be in silence with themselves. Solitude becomes a void they try to escape instead of a space they learn to inhabit. But solitude, when embraced intentionally, is not a punishment. It is a training ground. It is a forge. It is the space where real growth happens because there is nothing left to hide behind. You're exposed to your own thoughts, your own patterns, your own weaknesses. And if you can learn to sit with them, face them, and grow from them, you become untouchable. Silence has a way of showing you who you really are. It strips away the illusions. When there are no voices around to echo your opinions or validate your decisions, you are left with one voice, your own. And that voice, for many, is not yet trustworthy. That's why people avoid solitude. Because they don't trust themselves enough to face the truth without a buffer. But when you commit to personal evolution, you must walk through that silence. You must get to know the unfiltered version of you, the insecure you, the impatient you, the distracted you, the honest you, because that's where growth begins. In truth, not in pretense. Sitting in solitude is not the same as being lonely. Loneliness is the absence of connection. Solitude is the presence of self. It's not about being disconnected from the world. It's about being connected to yourself in a deeper way than you ever thought possible. When you learn to enjoy your own company, you stop needing constant validation from others. You stop performing. You stop waiting for someone to approve of your progress. You start moving from a place of internal alignment rather than external expectation. That shift is massive. It changes how you live, how you work, how you relate, how you show up. Solitude teaches you to become your own source of strength. You start making decisions based on clarity rather than fear. You become more honest with yourself. You see your patterns more clearly. The things you used to justify become intolerable. The lies you used to tell yourself lose their grip. And that kind of self-awareness doesn't happen in the noise. It happens in the quiet. It happens when the distractions are gone and all that remains is you, your past, your pain, your potential. There's a discipline in choosing solitude, because it requires you to slow down. It requires you to feel things you'd rather avoid. It brings to the surface the doubts and regrets and insecurities you've spent years suppressing. But instead of running, you stay, and in staying you begin to heal. Not through grand gestures or dramatic breakthroughs, but through stillness, through reflection. Through the slow, deliberate act of being with yourself long enough to understand what needs to change. Solitude also builds mental toughness. When you're no longer afraid of being alone, people can't manipulate you with fear of abandonment. They can't bait you with attention. They can't control your emotional state by withdrawing. You no longer chase people to feel whole. You no longer seek their company out of desperation. You're grounded. You're centered. You're powerful. Because you've built your inner world into a place you actually want to be. In solitude, you also discover your intuition, the deeper voice, the one that isn't reactive but wise. It's always been there, but it gets drowned out by noise. When you spend time alone, real, intentional time, you start to hear it more clearly. You begin to distinguish between what's true and what's fear, between what's you and what's conditioning, between what's important and what's just loud. And that inner clarity becomes your compass. It helps you navigate life with more confidence, more direction, and far less confusion. The world teaches us to stay busy, to keep moving, to keep talking, to keep performing. But there is nothing more rebellious, more healing, more transformative than choosing to pause. To sit in a room with yourself and not run. That's where real alignment is built. That's where you reconnect with your purpose, your priorities, your core values. Not because someone told you what they should be, but because you discovered them on your own, in the quiet. Solitude also reveals the areas in your life where you've outsourced responsibility. Maybe you've relied too much on other people to motivate you. Maybe you've blamed circumstances for your stagnation. Maybe you've allowed fear to mask itself as practicality. When you remove the noise, you start to see the stories you've been telling yourself. And once you see them, you can challenge them. You can dismantle them. You can rewrite them. That is the gift of solitude. It gives you access to the control panel of your life. People who embrace solitude become more intentional. They stop chasing quick fixes. They stop needing to be seen all the time. Their growth becomes internal before it ever becomes visible. And because they've done the inner work, they can move through life with quiet confidence. They're not loud, but they're unshakable. They're not boastful, but they're undeniable. Because everything they do comes from a place of deep alignment. Solitude also teaches you emotional regulation. When you sit with your thoughts, you learn to observe them instead of reacting to them. You realize not every emotion needs to be acted on. Not every thought is true. Not every urge needs to be obeyed. That space between stimulus and response grows wider. And in that space you find your strength. You become less reactive, less impulsive, more composed. And that self-control, that emotional discipline, is a superpower. You don't need to run to the mountains or live in isolation to access the power of solitude. You can carve it out in small pockets of your day. In the morning before the world wakes up. In the evening when everything winds down. In the moments when you resist the urge to check your phone and choose to check in with yourself instead. These are the spaces where growth lives. These are the moments that shape you into someone others can rely on. Not because you're loud, but because you're grounded. Solitude is the silent partner of self-mastery. If you can learn to be at peace in your own presence, you will never again depend on the presence of others to feel whole. You will never again hand over your power to be seen, to be heard, to be loved, because you'll know how to give those things to yourself first, and that knowing changes everything. It makes you more selective, more focused, more intentional. It filters your relationships. It sharpens your vision. It builds a life that is not just full, but fulfilling. You don't need the noise to grow. You need the silence. You need the space to confront and correct, to reflect and realign. Growth doesn't always look like action. Sometimes it looks like stillness. Sometimes it looks like sitting in a room, in your own presence, and deciding that you are enough. Not because the world said so, but because you finally believed it for yourself. That's the gift of solitude. And that's where your greatest evolution begins. Most of the progress you will ever make in life won't happen when people are watching. It won't happen in front of an audience or under the lights. It will happen in the dark, in the quiet, in the spaces where no one is clapping and no one is asking how you're doing. That's where you build. That's where you become dangerous. Not because you're trying to impress anyone, but because you're sharpening yourself for what you're meant to carry. You don't need the world to validate every step you take. You need to be willing to work when no one is paying attention. That's how greatness is built. Building your skills in silence is about understanding that your progress doesn't require applause. Growth isn't something you have to advertise. When you start valuing mastery over attention, you change the way you approach everything. You no longer rush the process just to show the world what you're doing. You slow down. You go deeper. You work on your craft with patience and precision. You stop worrying about being seen and start focusing on being effective. You're not just doing it to prove a point. You're doing it to become excellent. There's something sacred about developing your abilities in private. When no one's watching, there's no pressure to perform. You can fail without judgment. You can experiment without criticism. You can grow without comparison. And that freedom creates real skill. You're not just trying to keep up appearances. You're learning how to endure. You're learning how to refine. You're learning how to get up and keep going even when it feels like nothing is changing. That's where resilience is born. In the repetition. In the silence. In the refusal to quit just because no one is watching. Most people give up too soon because they don't see immediate results. They expect recognition before they've put in the work. They want praise before they've earned their stripes. But that's not how it works. You have to show up long before the reward shows up. You have to keep going long after the excitement fades. Because that's the only way to build something real. Consistency in the dark always leads to confidence in the light. You don't rise because you shouted your intentions. You rise because you stayed when it was hard, when it was quiet, when it was thankless. The world doesn't need more noise. It needs more mastery. People are obsessed with talking about what they're going to do, but few are willing to put in the time to actually become good at it. That's the difference. Are you addicted to the idea of progress, or are you willing to do the boring work it requires? Skill isn't built on motivation. It's built on discipline. It's built in the early mornings, the late nights, the long hours where you keep going not because you have to, but because you refuse to settle for average. Silence becomes a tool when you stop using it as an excuse and start using it as an advantage. It protects your process. It gives you space to focus. It allows you to tune out the noise and concentrate on what really matters. Your work, your improvement, your mission. You don't need feedback from people who haven't done what you're trying to do. You need solitude. You need practice. You need time. In the silence, you will question yourself. You'll wonder if it's working. You'll doubt whether it's worth it. You'll hear the voice that says maybe you're not good enough. That's normal. That's part of it. But if you can learn to keep moving in spite of that voice, you become unstoppable. Because now you're not just developing skills, you're developing character. You're building the kind of mindset that doesn't fold under pressure. You're becoming someone who doesn't need permission to keep going. You can tell who's serious by how they work when no one's looking. It's easy to show up when people are watching. It's harder to show up when it's just you and the task and the silence. That's the test. Do you still give it your all when there's no one to impress? Do you still study, still train, still grind even when it feels invisible? That's what separates the average from the elite. The elite are forged in solitude. They're sculpted in the shadows. They're born from the repetition no one claps for. This isn't about being a perfectionist. It's about honoring the process. It's about having enough self-respect to take your growth seriously. When you work in silence, you learn to love the process for what it is, not just what it brings. You find fulfillment not in recognition, but in progress. And that kind of fulfillment is sustainable. It doesn't fade when the attention fades. It stays, because you're not doing it for them. You're doing it for the future you're building. Eventually, you'll step out into the world, and people will be shocked at what you've become. They'll ask where you came from. They'll wonder how you did it. But they won't understand the hours you put in when no one was watching. They won't see the early mornings, the nights of doubt, the sacrifices. And they don't need to, because the result will speak louder than any explanation ever could. When you build in silence, the results make the noise for you. You don't have to tell the world you're coming. Just show up one day and let your work speak. Let your discipline speak. Let your transformation speak. There's a confidence that comes from knowing you did the work. It's quiet. It's unshakable. And it doesn't need validation. You walk differently when you've earned your strength in silence. You move differently when you know no one handed this to you. You built it, alone, unseen, uncelebrated, and that's exactly why it's real. So keep building, keep studying, keep refining, let everyone else talk while you train. Let them seek attention while you sharpen your edge. One day, the lights will find you. One day, the world will notice. But when they do, you won't be surprised. Because you didn't get lucky. You got ready. You built something that doesn't fade when the applause fades. You built skill. You built confidence. You built power. And you did it in silence. Energy is the most valuable currency you have. More than time, more than money, more than opportunity. Because if your energy is drained, none of those things matter. You can have all the hours in the day, all the money in the bank, all the potential in the world. But if your energy is scattered, your results will always fall short. This is why growth requires protection. You cannot grow into your highest self while being constantly pulled in 1,000 directions. You cannot stay focused if your energy is leaking into meaningless conversations, toxic environments, and people who feed off your attention but never pour anything back in. Protecting your energy is not selfish, it's survival. And if you don't guard it, someone else will spend it for you. Every time you allow yourself to be consumed by drama, you're paying with energy. Every time you overextend yourself for people who don't respect your time or values, you're paying with energy. Every time you say yes when your intuition is screaming no, you're bleeding energy. And the worst part is, most of this happens in small moments. It's not one big dramatic event, it's the accumulation of tiny compromises one after another, until you wake up and wonder why you feel so depleted, so uninspired, so far from the person you know you're capable of becoming. High performers don't just manage time, They manage access. They're not available to everyone. They're not involved in everything. They're not constantly checking notifications, picking up every call, or reacting to every message. They understand that focus is a byproduct of protection. The more you protect your peace, the more clearly you can see your path. And the more clearly you see your path, the more dangerous you become to anything trying to distract or derail you. Not because you're aggressive, but because you're intentional. You've drawn a line between what matters and what doesn't, and you refuse to waste your life on what doesn't. People often confuse being kind with being available. But you can have a good heart and still enforce strong boundaries. You can be compassionate without being consumed. You can support others without self-sacrifice. The truth is, the more you value your energy, the less you tolerate anything that drains it. You stop explaining your boundaries. You stop justifying your need for solitude. You stop feeling guilty for choosing rest, for choosing space, for choosing yourself. Because you realize that the more you protect your energy, the more you have to give to the people and projects that truly deserve it. There will always be people who demand more than you can give, who mistake your silence for weakness, who assume access is entitlement. Let them misunderstand you. Let them talk. Let them walk away if your boundaries make them uncomfortable. The people meant for your journey will respect your protection. They'll honor your need for focus. They'll understand that just because you're not available on demand doesn't mean you don't care. It means you're committed to something bigger than pleasing everyone. Protecting your energy also means watching what you consume. Not just who you're around, but what you let into your mind. The media you engage with. The conversations you participate in. The content you absorb. If you constantly feed your mind negativity, chaos, gossip, and comparison, you are poisoning your energy before you even take your first action. Your mindset is the gatekeeper of your growth. You need to feed it with clarity, with truth, with direction. That doesn't mean ignoring reality. It means being intentional about what you allow to influence you. Not everything deserves your attention. Not every story deserves your belief. Not every voice deserves space in your head. You also protect your energy by choosing your battles. Not every insult deserves a comeback. Not every misunderstanding needs to be corrected. Not every confrontation needs a response. Sometimes the most powerful move is to say nothing, to disengage, to keep walking, because responding costs energy, and if it doesn't serve your mission, it's not worth the price. This doesn't mean being passive. It means being strategic. It means knowing the difference between action and reaction. One moves you forward, the other keeps you stuck. The more you grow, the more you'll notice how much noise there is in the world. People yelling over each other, competing for attention, creating drama just to feel significant. And the more silent you become, the more their noise will stand out. That's when you realize silence isn't just peace, it's power. You don't need to speak to be understood. You don't need to explain to be respected. You don't need to fight to be strong. You simply need to stay focused on your vision. Protect your energy like your life depends on it, and let your work speak for itself. You also protect your energy by being honest with yourself about what's draining you. Sometimes it's not people, it's your own habits, your own lack of boundaries, your own refusal to say no. Growth requires accountability. You have to look at your life and ask yourself what's costing you more than it's giving you. What are you holding on to that's no longer aligned with your future? Who are you trying to please at the expense of your own peace? What routines have become rituals of self-neglect? This is where transformation begins. Not with more effort, but with more awareness. You don't need to do more. You need to do less of what doesn't serve you. You need to get quiet enough to hear what your soul is trying to tell you. You need to stop numbing the burnout and start facing it. You need to stop waiting for permission to take your energy seriously. No one else is going to hand you that. You have to claim it. You have to build a life that doesn't just look good, but feels good, and that starts by protecting the energy that creates everything. You will know you're growing when protecting your peace becomes more important than being understood. When you stop reacting to everything and start responding with intention. When you stop trying to control other people's opinions and start focusing on your own alignment. When you stop explaining yourself to those who don't even listen. These are the signs that your energy is becoming sacred to you. And once that happens, your whole life begins to shift. Protecting your energy isn't about isolation. It's about elevation. It's about creating an environment, both internally and externally, that allows you to rise. That allows you to think clearly, move strategically, rest deeply, and live purposefully. And the more you commit to that, the more unstoppable you become. Not because you have more hours than others, but because you've stopped wasting your power on things that don't matter. This is what high-level growth requires. Not more noise, not more approval, just more protection, more intention, more alignment. Guard your energy like your future depends on it, because it absolutely does. Pain has a way of introducing you to yourself in ways nothing else can. It strips away the masks, the performances, the illusions of control. It forces you to feel things you never wanted to feel. It brings you face to face with your most vulnerable, most unguarded self. And while most people run from that kind of pain, those who grow understand that pain is not the enemy. Pain is the blueprint. It's not something to hide from. It's something to study, to sit with, to allow. Because within that pain is the roadmap to your next evolution. If you're willing to pay attention, there is a deep and silent power in the way pain molds a person. Not in the dramatic, performative sense where you tell the world how strong you are, but in the quiet way you carry yourself after you've survived something that should have broken you. There's something different in your eyes, in your silence, in your presence. People can sense that you've been through something. Something you didn't post about. Something you didn't announce. Something you endured behind closed doors and used to build yourself in private. That's the kind of strength no one can fake. That's the kind of power no one can give you. It's earned. It's built in the dark. When you're going through pain, the world will try to rush you through it. People will offer quick fixes. They'll tell you to stay positive, to move on, to distract yourself. But healing doesn't happen on demand. Growth doesn't happen on command. Real transformation requires space. It requires silence. It requires a willingness to feel every bit of what's breaking inside you without trying to numb it or explain it away. You have to let it burn. Because what's being destroyed is not you. It's the version of you that can't go where you're headed. It's in those quiet nights, when the noise dies down and the pain comes to the surface, that the work begins. Not the external kind of work that the world sees, but the internal excavation of your soul. You begin to ask hard questions. You begin to confront buried emotions. You begin to see your patterns, your tendencies to overgive, your fear of abandonment, your need for validation. The way you betray yourself just to be accepted, and none of it is easy. But all of it is necessary. Because until you address what pain is trying to teach you, you'll keep repeating the same cycles under different circumstances. People think healing is about becoming who you used to be before the pain. But that's not the goal. Healing is about becoming someone new because of the pain. It's about using what hurt you as raw material to rebuild. Stronger, wiser, more conscious, more intentional. You don't go back. You go forward. With scars that no longer bleed but remind you of what you survived. Scars that carry wisdom. That carry depth. That carry a quiet strength people can feel even if they don't understand it. Pain forces you to stop pretending. It strips you down to your essence. It exposes everything that's false. The relationships you were tolerating. The dreams you abandoned. The parts of you that you silenced for the comfort of others. Pain brings all of that to the surface so you can choose again. So you can decide, do I want to go back to that version of me who kept shrinking? Or do I want to honor what this pain is trying to awaken in me? And the moment you choose to let the pain mold you instead of break you, you reclaim your power. There's a kind of clarity that only pain can bring. When your heart has been shattered, your vision sharpens. You begin to see what matters and what doesn't. Who matters and who never did. You stop chasing shallow connections. You stop explaining your worth. You stop entertaining anything that costs your peace. Because once you've suffered in silence and survived it, your tolerance for nonsense evaporates. You become more protective of your space, of your time, of your energy. And not because you're guarded, but because you're wise. You start to realize that not everyone can walk with you after your pain has refined you. Some people will want the old version of you, the one who made things easy, who never questioned, who always said yes. But you've outgrown that version. You've outgrown people who benefit from your self-abandonment. And you don't owe anyone an apology for that. When pain transforms you, it also transforms your standards. You no longer allow yourself to be diluted just to make others comfortable. You show up fully. Or not at all. Pain also teaches you compassion, not the performative kind. The real kind. The kind that doesn't judge someone's struggle because you've been there too. The kind that sees past the surface. That listens without fixing. That holds space without rushing. People who have been broken and rebuilt in silence often carry a deeper empathy. They understand that not all wounds are visible, that not all healing is linear, and that sometimes, the most powerful thing you can do is sit with someone in their pain without trying to change it. You become more discerning after pain. More intuitive. More in tune with what feels right and what doesn't. Your boundaries become clearer. your voice becomes stronger, and your presence becomes heavier, not in a burdensome way, but in a grounded way. You walk differently when you've had to rebuild yourself. You carry yourself with a kind of authority that doesn't come from titles or followers, but from knowing you've already walked through fire and come out the other side. Quieter, stronger, more focused, more unshakable. People may never know the depths of what you went through. They may never understand the silent battles you fought, but they'll feel it. In your energy, in your discipline, in the way you refuse to settle, in the way you hold yourself. Because pain, when processed correctly, doesn't just change you, it elevates you, it sharpens you, it prepares you, and it becomes the very foundation upon which you build your next level. So don't rush the process. Don't numb the discomfort. Don't silence the lessons. Let the pain mold you. Let it burn away what no longer belongs. Let it strip you of everything that was never real. And as you rise, slowly, silently, fully, you'll realize that the pain wasn't here to destroy you. It was here to reveal you. The real you. The stronger you. The version of you that doesn't need to be loud to be powerful. That doesn't need to be seen to be valid. That doesn't need anyone's permission to be whole. That's what pain gives you when you stop resisting it. It gives you back to yourself. Fully, unapologetically, quietly unstoppable.